What is up, everyone? It's Kanan.
It's Jessie.
And we are the Geeky Satan Couple, and we are back with another video going over the members of Team RWBY's growth and character development as the series has went from Volume 1 to Volume 8. Last week was RWBY. Today we are talking about Weiss, the Ice Queen herself, to a lot of people, best girl, and in a lot of ways she is the best girl because she just is. She's Weiss Schnee, so of course she deserves the title of best girl. But anyway, as always, if you enjoy our content, please hit that subscribe button, hit the notification bell, click that like button, leave a comment. So Weiss, to a lot of people, has had the largest amount of character development. Now, of course, if we went over everything in great detail, this would be an over an hour video. We don't want to do that, so if we leave some stuff out, we're sorry, but we're going to talk about Weiss's change in the most key moments. 9 times out of 10 we go off the rails, though, so we'll see how well that goes. So, at the very beginning of RWBY, Weiss was not a lot of people's favorite character. Like, I think even you didn't like her at first.
No.
So at the beginning, Weiss was your stereotypical
Rich girl.
Well, spoiled rich girl in a lot of ways. She was very bossy. She was very demeaning. Like, she literally talked down to RWBY in front of her own sister, to a point where Yang was about to throw hands at that point. But, it's kind of funny, even though we've not watched Ice Queendom yet, seeing what some people have said about Weiss in Ice Queendom, it's like, did you all forget how she was at the beginning of RWBY? Because people have gotten so used to how Weiss is now that it's kind of a culture shock when they see how she used to be. Because Weiss was very not likable at the beginning. Like I said, she talked down on RWBY. She came off as very anti-Faunus in a lot of ways. But even in the early volumes, she did go, she was only very unbearable maybe during the first few episodes of Volume 1. Like, she was so pompous that when a teacher told her about how she was being, it was Port, she had the nerve to look at a teacher and go, "How dare you?" And I remember watching that. Like, I was so done with, the first time I saw Volume 1, I was so done with Weiss. I'd done the whole mocking, "Oh, how dare I? How dare I?" Because it's a teacher she's talking to. No matter what background she comes from, Port is still not really an authority figure, but he's a professor. He has the right to correct you on your behavior if that's what she was talking to him about. "I think I should have been the leader of Team RWBY." And he's like, "Nah."
No.
That is, even though the way he put it was trying to be, a little constructive, that's pretty much what he was like. He was like, "Nah." Because, it was almost in a way like Port saw right away that Weiss did not have what it took to be a real leader. Did she want to be a boss? Yeah. But was she getting that mixed in with actually being a real team leader? And Port gave her a pretty good lecture on how she was being, and said that she had a poor attitude. And that's what probably really decided Ozpin's decision. Of course, there was other factors that Ozpin made RWBY the leader, but that's not what this is about. So even then, Weiss went through a little bit of a character change. She came back to the room. RWBY's out cold over her homework. And just the simple act of getting RWBY a cup of coffee was already a big change for Weiss. She still took the opportunity to be like, "Oh, that's wrong, by the way," but said that she wanted to be the best teammate she could. So,
And she threw in before she left, "I always wanted bunk beds."
Yeah.
You could see the child that was still, pretty much trapped inside Weiss was starting to come out.
Yeah.
Her true self inside was coming out underneath all of her spoiledness.
Yeah. Now, of course, throughout volumes 2 and 3, Weiss still had an attitude, but she was no longer being unsufferable.
that talk with Port made her start thinking, like, heavily. So that's what started her change,
Yeah.
to keep thinking that way. Okay, do I, like, if she got, like, I've noticed if she got, like, bossy, she'd step back and kind of, like, the looks, like, on, if you look at, like, facial looks and stuff, she kind of thought, okay, should I be acting like this?
Yeah.
Like,
Now,
still.
now, of course, Weiss still had her moments by the end of Volume 1, and that is her perception of Faunus and the White Fang, and that caused a big old rift in Team RWBY when that's pretty much when Blake is ousted as not only a Faunus, but she was also a member of the White Fang. And, Weiss acting like she didn't care if they found Blake, and I don't know, and, like, even though it seems like a lot of stuff happened off screen that kind of changed Weiss's perception of that, I wished we had seen it. But by the time they find Blake and, her and Penny and Ruby and Sun kind of took out Roman and the White Fang members that had been in Vale, Weiss was like, I don't care now, but next time come to us. Not him,
Yeah.
pointing at Sun. So, yeah, like, by the end of Volume 1, Weiss has kind of went through 2 major character flaw arcs that has been corrected. Now, a lot of people say it was rushed. Well, that's Volume 1 in general. There was a lot of things that was rushed in Volume 1. But Volume 2 through 3, Weiss still has the attitude, but you start seeing her taking part in things that she more than likely never would had during Volume 1 or before Volume 1. Like the food fight at the beginning of Volume 2, which is still, I think, Jess's favorite
Yes,
episode
it's still
to this day.
one of my absolute favorites.
And, making little jokes like after her and Yang beat Flint and Neon, I may not be singing for a while when she got outed of the tournament and all that. But, so yeah, you have small things with Weiss, and plus her interactions with Winter. That's another thing. Weiss makes such a big deal about being a Schnee at the beginning of the series, but as the Beacon arc continues, you start seeing that Weiss has a different perception of the Schnee family than, say, her father does, even though we had not met Jacques at this time. We still get hints that if Weiss one day took over the Schnee family and the Schnee Dust Company, things would be different. And of course, at that time, we didn't know a whole lot. The only member of her family that we actually got to meet in the early volumes was Winter, and we see Weiss acting like a little sister that looks up to the older sibling. Now, of course, Winter at first shows not so great qualities, like, okay, it's very obvious that Winter loves her little sister. It is very obvious. Some would say that Winter shouldn't have just left Weiss and ran to the military, but we don't know where Winter would be if she had stayed, even if she had stayed for Weiss. And of course, at first, Winter comes off very cold. People don't like that she gave Weiss a little slap on the head and called her a boob. But the thing is, she's also showing that she cares what Weiss's life at Beacon has been. She's like, I didn't ask you about your rank or how high you are in class. Are you eating properly? Have you taken any hobbies? Have you made friends? She cares. It's just like she just had a weird way of showing it. Maybe it's because they were in public. I don't know. But
it's like the military mindset while still trying to care while in public. Like keeping her image, but still,
yeah.
wanting to, she's pretty much demanding to know that she's doing what she needs to.
Yeah, the fact that she cared that Weiss had made any friends was big. And then, of course, their little talk when they were alone, Winter training her a little bit with her summoning and all that. That showed the real Winter. It's like there for a while before we learned more about Willow, whenever people would rank the RWBY moms, people would put Winter in that place because that's all we had at that time. And a lot of people saw Winter as being like a mom to Weiss in a lot of ways. Um, but also, we see Weiss avoiding her father, avoiding his calls, to the point where he cuts her off. He makes it to where she can't buy anything. So it was put into our minds very early that Weiss did not get along with her father, particularly maybe didn't care much for her father, and so that already puts that contrast there of, yes, Weiss believes in her last name, but as she states many times, she's more than a name. And it also goes back to Red Like Roses, her being burdened by the royal test. So they try to put it into us very, very early that yes, Weiss is cold, but there's an internal thing going there. Also, of course, her color being a major thing, especially in the early volume. The white, but with the red collar underneath. Many people associating that with her grandfather, Nicholas Schnee. So yes, once we get into the Mistral arc, we see really a complete 180 of Weiss's character. Part of that being for what she saw at the fall of Beacon, but also her time at Beacon changed her. I almost said Ruby. Weiss is now way more caring. She's kind of now the black sheep of Atlas society in that she doesn't believe in the pompous acting anymore, acting like you care. And we see a lot of dark stuff with Weiss in Volume 4 with, her father threatening to just lock her up in her room and goes as far as slapping her, saying, you need to remember your place. This is also where we meet Klein, who is more of a father figure to Weiss than anyone. He's also the representation of the Seven Dwarves, which Jess did not get
I
at
didn't
first.
catch it first. Because then I started seeing his eyes start changing. And that's just something...
He's pretty much all Seven Dwarves. He's got split personality disorder, pretty much.
But I mean, it's because of everything else going on, that's the one thing about when you go back and watch things. There's things that you missed the first time that you see again. So... Yeah. Then we've noticed a lot of things like that. Like for me, that was just one of the things that I never noticed. All I knew is he was just he's one of my favorite characters.
Yeah. We also learn more about how bad Weiss's home life really is at this point, not just with her father. You've got her little brother who at that time is like a clone of his father, who he acts like he does not care about Weiss. All he cares about is that if her claim to the Schnee Dust Company is gone, it's his now. And then, of course, we don't see Willow at that time, but we learn very quickly that Willow is an alcoholic, mostly because look who she's married to. But even in the RWBY DC comics, we did get to see a bit of Willow acting like a pompous Schnee. Now, what was that? The alcohol was... It's something else, we don't know. We just know that by the time we finally see her in Volume 7, she's kind of a broken woman at that time.
We learn a lot of things at that point, though. Like, we do learn that Wesley just... It was an act because that's how his father was the influence around him. That was his way. We've learned there's a lot of RWBY characters. That was his way of hiding what he was feeling, because it's not like he could speak out against his dad. So go with it. He's still a spoiled brat, but he really cared about his sister, and Willow pointed that out to Weiss.
Well, there's a lot of dark themes with the Schnees. There's physical abuse, there's mental abuse, there's alcoholism.
Well, we also found out that technically the company her father was married in. It's her company.
Yeah.
So that was a huge development in their whole family line. Learning that
his white hair is dye. We learned that really quickly.
But learning that okay, well he's in charge. Okay, well wait a minute. This lies on Willow's side. This is Willow's family.
Yeah.
He was married in, so it changed things a lot if you think about it. When you go back, because he took over and pretty much pushed her out of the way.
Mm-hmm.
So back in the early volumes, it makes a lot of sense though. Like why why their mother backed away, why Willow was like started drinking more and more is because what else was she gonna do to get rid of everything going around her?
Well, also it paints the picture that the reason why now the Schnee family and the Schnee Dust Company has such a bad reputation for their bad business practices, their treatment of Faunus and their other workers, it's all Jacques Schnee.
Yeah.
That has created that. Which is, I think, why part of Weiss's story is that she started to step away from her name. Does that mean she won't take over the Schnee Dust Company in her adult years? Who knows? We have yet to get that far. But you know, we also see, you know, like Jacques making Weiss a prisoner in her own home, you know, pretty much forcing her to sing at that event. She's like a songbird trapped in a cage. But then we see at the get-together where, you know, she acts out in front of everybody, but it's because she's the only one, like Ironwood says, that is thinking and talking with any sense, because Ironwood knows what's going on. But all in all, this eventually leads to Weiss running away. And thanks to some Grimm and all that, she ends up in Mistral and kidnapped by none other than Raven Bronwyn, Yang's mother. And so, of course, you know, we get a lot, you know, with that, you know, with Vernal being very, very hostile toward Weiss because of the Schnee name. And then, of course, Yang shows up on the scene. And really, it was heartwarming because it was the first two members of Team RWBY to reunite after they split up at the end of Volume 3. But Weiss and Yang were never shown to really interact all that much on screen, and if they did, it was usually conflicting, whether it be Yang being like, you know, what do you have against my sister, or Yang saying, you know, you don't really care if we find her, do you? Though we did see a little bit of it when Yang was accused of breaking Mercury's leg, you know, Weiss saying, you know, you're hot-headed, but, you know, not heartless, you know, and stuff like that. So she at least had some nice things to say about Yang. But, of course, you know, Weiss showing true affection to someone, that was also a huge... Besides Klein and all that.
That was a huge step in her development.
Yeah,
so.
She hugs Yang around the neck, you know, says, I missed you so much.
And that was the start of everyone says, Yang must just give really good hugs.
Yeah.
Because... That's just what started that, really.
Yeah. But, you know, then, you know, she learns along with Yang about some of Ozpin's past during their talk with Raven and all that. Then, of course, Raven sends them to where Ruby is. Then we finally get an even bigger reunion between Ruby, Yang, and Weiss. And this is another big thing in that Ruby and Yang hug because they're sisters, they're family. And, you know, when at the end of Volume 3, when Ruby told Yang she loved her, Yang didn't respond because Yang was in a dark place at that time. But when they reunite, Yang finally returns that I love you. And then they look at Weiss and you know, they invite her into the hug, which is something huge because we know that Weiss sees Team RWBY as her family. And this is probably the closest she's had to a family inviting her into an embrace. Now, of course, through this and Volume 5, we see that even though Weiss is a different person now, Nora even bring it up, saying, you know, who melted your heart, you know, and all that. It was, that's such a funny scene. But it's great because it gives on-screen validation that Weiss is not the character she was in the early volumes. But we see moments where Weiss still gets very annoyed. Like when Ruby says, come on, sis, you can't lose to a girl who's wearing a skirt. And Weiss is like, you wear a skirt, Ruby. And she's like, Weiss, why are you not more excited? And Weiss just gets the most annoyed look on her face. Like, just, like, she still has the attitude, but she is a whole different character at this point. Um, and so, then the whole battle at Haven happens. Weiss gets stabbed. That was all dramatic and all that. But once again, with Blake coming back and they once again have a reunion, the family is back together. And then we move into Volume 6, where we get a little bit more like the opening of Volume 6. Like, it looks like her and Ruby are playing tag, I guess, which is something you would originally think you would see Weiss do. But it's just to show more of how much Team RWBY has thawed her out, for lack of a better term. But, during like the apathy part where you have this realization that Weiss is thinking about her mom when Ruby is talking about Crow and how bad his drinking has all of a sudden got. You realize that this is something that her and Ruby sadly have in common, but it's something that they can talk to each other about, even though Weiss has not really verbally said that her mom is a drinker. But then when they get to Argus, you see more of a change in Weiss when they're interacting with Atlas personnel. When Cordovan looks at... I still can't tell if she looks at just Blake or if she's looking at Blake and Yang, because I'm sure it was broadcasted what Yang supposedly did during the Vital tournament. But, saying people of questionable character. And Weiss steps in and does her whole famous, what's that supposed to mean? So it shows that Weiss no longer thinks like the Atlas people do. Then, of course, Volume 7 was very interesting because we all know that Weiss did not want to go back to Atlas. She just got done running from the place. And what's one of the first things that happens in Volume 7? She dumps a racist guy in Mantle into a dumpster for calling Blake a stupid faunus, which, once again, huge character development.
Her reaction after she did it, too.
It was worth it. And then, of course, when they go to the dust mine with the Aesops, she tells Blake that she really wishes she could make up for how her family has treated the faunus. Which, if you once again, looking back at Volume 1 Weiss to Volume 7 Weiss is it's almost like, how I want to say this, two different personalities altogether. She's like Two-Face. One side was not such a great side, and the other side being the pure, and how she always was as a character. And then again, once again, you get silly stuff like Blake and Yang getting ready for their date. Yes, it was a date. And she's just like, oh my gosh, get me out of here. And John pops in, hey, me and Oscar are going to the New Zealand one. Yep. I still wished we had gotten an episode of showing everyone else on their little outings while the massacre at the rally happened, like showing how they found out or whatever. Blake and Yang at the club, Weiss, Sean, and Oscar at the movies.
Them with a movie.
Yeah, that would have been would Weiss have even been able to go to a movie without being recognized and stuff like that? And now, of course, we have Volume 8, which, showing more of Weiss being silly, even though it was other characters doing stuff to her at her expense, like Blake saying, is there not a building your family doesn't own? And then Nora almost killing her. That was the funniest moment, I think. For such a dark volume that had a very dark ending, that's probably one of the most lighthearted moments in the volume, and it's at Weiss's expense. um, and then, of course, we have toward the end where Weiss is the last member of Team RWBY left. Now, of course, we all know Team RWBY, Blake and Yang were not dead. They had just been sent to the Ever After. But for Weiss, they were. They were gone. She was never going to see them again. And, we have that one scene of her firing at Cinder with Gamble Shroud, and she has got tears running down her face. Oh, gosh, we almost forgot a very important part of Volume 7, and that is her confronting Jacques.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, wow, completely almost forgot about that. So, we all know that Weiss was very, very... Like, she did not want to run to her father at all. It's to the point later in this scene that we see that Winter was avoiding even being there.
Yeah.
But he shows up, and of course he's complaining to Ironwood about everything. And, like, it's wild. He does not realize, like, and he's like, you roped my daughter into this, because at first he didn't even notice she was there.
Which says a lot in itself, too. If he didn't notice his own daughter is standing over there. Like.
Yeah. So at first, Jacques tries to be forceful, and Weiss claps back, pretty much. And so he tries a different way, and that is bringing up her mother. This is gaslighting at its best, and you can tell because Blake realizes it. She sees the same thing that Adam did to her. He's doing twice. That's why you see her ears point the way they do, because if a cat does that in real life, you're about to get the bad end of the stick, because they're either going to claw you or bite you. And they show support to her. Blake grabs her hand because Blake can relate to what he is trying to do to Weiss. Yang on the other side, and of course she looks over and Ruby gives her that reassuring smile. And of course he says the line, so these are the little friends that you gave up everything for. And Weiss says, not friends, family. And so we finally get that satisfaction that Weiss sees her teammates not just as teammates, not just as friends, but as her new family. So jumping back to Volume 8, that's what makes this so heartbreaking, with her having these tears down her eyes. Get out of my face, Nat. That she thinks she has lost her family, pretty much. Which we know that that's not the truth. And Weiss does join them. She is the last one to. I always wondered if maybe there was some reason for Weiss being the last one, but maybe it's because of Winter showing up as the Winter Maiden. And of course, we do have that heartbreaking moment of Winter attempting to reach Weiss and screams her name, and she is not fast enough. She didn't care about leaving Jean behind. She could have easily picked him up, but she left the poor guy to fend for himself. And I think to this day, Jean is still the most shocking one of why he fell, because none of us were expecting Jean. I wasn't too shocked that Neo fell, because I was
surprised, but not as shocked as Jean.
Yeah, it's because Winter just left him. But also, other things we can't forget that happened in Volume 8. Weiss kind of reconnecting with her little brother. Jacques getting arrested. Well, there's another thing we almost completely forgot. Weiss having the biggest hand and getting her father arrested. And
can I do that?
Yeah. And also the fact that Weiss made it to where Jacques would be saved. After everything that he did, she still cared enough about him. She
still knows, okay, he's still my father. Not that I care for how he's been, but she didn't want him to die. So...
But then Ironwood kills him in cold blood.
Yeah.
So, I'm sure she'll... Well, I mean, now that Ironwood is gone too, I don't know what would happen with her finding out. But maybe, like I said, we'll see the ghosts of the past, and maybe her and Jacques will come to some kind of patched up ending for that story. Sorry, we're trying to wrap this up, and I'm remembering stuff as it comes to me. So yeah, and so we have kind of it's kind of sad in a lot of ways when Winter comes through the portal as the Winter Maiden, and there's Willow and Wesley, and I forgot his name there for a sec, and Klein, and she looks at him, and of course she has tears coming down her face because she now thinks that her little sister is dead. So it's kind of sad. It's like the Schnee family, in a way, is coming back together, but at the loss of Weiss, who kind of spearheaded that change. Because we also saw with her interactions with Willow that maybe Willow can be on the verge of recovery. But yeah, I know there's a lot we left out, but like I said, this video would be an hour long, and it's already at 31 minutes, so I think that's a good way to end that, in that Weiss probably does have the biggest character change, and her character change probably has so far affected the most characters related to her, whether it be her trying to save her father even after everything that he did, even though she kind of brought his downfall on as well. Her kind of pretty much being Wesley's salvation, and maybe her mother's as well. But we'll have to see once they return from the Ever After how much all that sticks. I'm sure Winter is going to blame herself for not saving her. But we still don't know how much of the real world we will see in Volume 9. For all we know, it takes place completely in Ever After before we get to the Vacuo stuff. So yes, Weiss went, and as we said in our RWBY Fairy Tales video about Team RWBY also being the Wizard of Oz, Weiss was the Tin Man. She found her heart, and now she's a completely different character. So yes, Weiss went from a very snobby, spoiled, not so nice person to really being one of the most caring members of Team RWBY. So she's not really the Ice Queen anymore, as far as her heart being made of ice, but she is the queen to a lot of people. She is the best girl, and she has earned that title for a lot of people, as she has done a lot of good in most recent volumes, especially during the Atlas arc. She was one of the characters that affected the most people in a positive way. So I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you did, once again, please hit that subscribe button, hit the notification bell, click that like button. We've kind of been on a roll here recently. So as always, guys, this is Kanan.
This is Jessie.
We love you all very, very much. Stay safe out there. Take care of yourselves. We'll see you in the video for Blake. See yous then.
Bye.
Bye.